Hello and welcome to All About Russia. My name's Andrew and today we'll be learning about the Arkhangelsk Oblast. The Arkhangelsk Oblast, located in the northwest of Russia on the White and Barents Seas. It is part of the Northwestern Federal District and part of the Northern Economic Region. It shares borders with the Karelian Republic to the west, with the Murmansk Oblast to the north, with the Donetsk Autonomous Okrug and the Komi Republic to the east, and with the Vologda and Kirov Oblasts to the south. The Arkhangelsk Oblast is over 150,000 square miles in size, making it larger than Paraguay, but with a population of just over 1 million. It is the 12th largest federal district by size, 47th in size of population, and is on Moscow Standard Time. The oblast includes the islands of Franz Josef Land and Novaya Zemlya, and whilst technically does actually include the Donetsk Autonomous Okrug, we will not be including it in this video today, and will itself be its own video. Over half the land is forested, with farmland making up just over 2% due to the very severe terrain. Rivers and lakes make up about 3% of the oblast, with only 0.5% being made up of settlements. The rest of the terrain is a mixture of tundra and Arctic desert. The oblast has access to the White, Kara and Barents Seas, with the longest river in the Republic being the Northern Dvina, which runs through the middle of the oblast. The oblast is not especially mountainous, with the highest point being the Chitlarsky Kamen in the Timan Ridge. The flag of the oblast is a white background with a blue St. Andrew's cross across it. In the centre of the flag is the coat of arms, which, perhaps not unsurprisingly, is a picture of Michael the Archangel casting down Satan on a yellow background. This is meant to represent the abundance, power and holiness of the oblast. The flag was adopted on the 23rd of September 2009. The oblast also has an anthem which is playing right now and will of course be included in the description below. The oblast is divided into 26 administrative regions, with 7 of those being of city status. Arkhangelsk is, of course, the administrative centre, with the islands of Victoria and Franz Josef being included as part of the oblast. As before stated, the Donetsk Autonomous Okrug technically are part of the oblast, but have been administering their districts separately since 2015. It is also home to the closed city of Mirny, which in Soviet times hosted intercontinental ballistic missiles, and today is used as a cosmodrome city. The area we now know as the Arkhangelsk Oblast has been occupied since about 10,000 years BC, with evidence of Mesolithic tools being discovered in the Vrongara River. Historians believe a Finno-Ugric people entered the area about 3,000 years ago, hunting and fishing in the area. Our first written sources come from the Norse, who actually referred to the area as Bjarmaland. Vikings raided and traded with people of the area, who appeared to be a mixture of Sami, Karelian and Chut peoples, for a mixture of furs, walrus tusks as well as silver. This actually connected the oblast to the wider Scandinavian trading world, and coins have been discovered in Arkhangelsk Oblast dating from around 1000 years AD, minted in England and as far away as Baghdad. Novgorodian influence in the area appears from about 1146 onward, with the Pomors and Sami people along the White Sea coast paying tribute to the Novgorodian Republic. This is actually quite significant, as only Christian vassals would pay tribute rather than tithe, which is what pagans would pay, implying that Christianity had already penetrated the region by the time of the Novgorodian connection. Since the first Novgorodian contact, Russian people have been migrating to the area, but this was accelerated after the Mongols invaded in the 13th century. This saw huge numbers of Russian people heading northward for safety and thus occupying the area, which in turn led to a flight of the native peoples further north and some even arriving in Norway. Spells of raiding with intermittent trading actually defined the Norwegian relationship with the area at this time. The last Norwegian raid occurred in 1419. That year is also significant, as it was the year that the Novgorodians actually built the monastery of St. Michael the Archangel on the present site of Arkhangelsk. From 1397, the area around the Northern Dvina River started to fall under Muscovite control. With the Republic's fall in 1478, the entire area was under Muscovite control, and the northern port of Kolmogorye was used as their main exporting centre. The remoteness of the area was attractive to certain people, and the founding of the Solovetsky Monastery on the remote Solovetsky Islands, as well as the Kozhozerski Monastery a century later. In the middle of the 16th century, an English ship arrived off the coast. This was commanded by an Englishman known as Richard Chancellor, who was looking for a northern route to India. The Englishmen, once learned that they were not in India but in fact in Muscovy, were hastened to the court of the then Tsar Ivan the Terrible and made the first official contact between the English and Russian crowns. With the arrival of these English ships, the mainly desolate White Sea coast became a hub of great economic activity, with new markets further west. The area around the monastery of St. Michael the Archangel was actually developed at this point, as it was easier for the ships to arrive at that point, so much so that on the 15th of April 1584, Tsar Ivan the Terrible announced New Kolmogorye on the location of the existing monastery. A few years later, the new settlement took the name of the existing monastery and became the present Arkhangelsk. Trade with at first the English ships, but soon to be followed by Scottish and Dutch, led to a huge development of the area, with a great influx of Mediterranean and woolen goods into Russia and new ports to export their furs and grain to. At this point, Arkhangelsk was Russia's only port. Unfortunately, during this period of time, there was great unrest with the peasantry, who were bitter against having to pay dues to the clergy. This culminated in the middle of the 16th century with riots and several monasteries actually being burnt down, including Klonovo. Worse still, even this new development of trade could not stop famine, which started in 1601 and would carry on for 2 more years. The start of the 17th century was with great unease and disorder across Russia, and the Arkhangelsk Oblast was no exception. The start of the 17th century led to great disorder across Russia, with civil wars and pretenders to the throne all arriving at once. The Arkhangelsk Oblast was not spared this devastation. Whilst its northern location spared it the worst of the trouble, in 1613 Polish-Lithuanian forces ravaged the land and nearly took Arkhangelsk as they retreated further north. More woe struck the city as 2 years later a huge fire burnt much of the existing wooden structures, forcing them to rebuild in stone instead. During the middle of the 17th century, the area struck was part of the wider salt riots, with the peasantry up in arms against the rising price of salt and the state of Russia as a whole. As we've discussed in the Altai videos, the middle of the 17th century also saw a schism between the Orthodox Church itself. Efforts to modernise the way Orthodox believers of different nationalities worshipped God and how many fingers they held up when making the sign of the cross led to a divide, and thousands of Russians who refused to change their traditional ways were branded as heretics and enemies of the state. This in turn led to a huge exodus of old believers across Russia, including to the Arkhangelsk Oblast. In fact, many fled to the Solovetsky Monastery and rose up in arms, which took over 7 years to be crushed by Tsarist troops. Tsar Alexei I, who was worried about Swedish influence in the area, built the Gostiny Dvor, part trade house, part fortress, should the Swedes attack. In 1693, Tsar Peter the Great actually toured the Oblast and laid the foundations of the Russian Imperial Navy there. Arkhangelsk at this point had over 29 trading houses and over 40 ships regularly calling the city home. The city of Arkhangelsk had prospered due to a decree in 1667 forbidding any foreign ships under any Russian port other than Arkhangelsk, making it the main hub for economic activities in Russia. This was so much so that by the end of the 17th century, nearly 80% of the entire trade revenue for Russia came through Arkhangelsk. In 1708, the region was incorporated as part of the wider Arkhangelsk Governorate, with of course the capital being Arkhangelsk. However, decrees passed from 1713 to 1725 redirected most of the trade from Arkhangelsk to the new ice-free port of St. Petersburg. This saw the average amount of ships calling into this port city drop from 200 to just 19 in 1724. Whilst many of these decrees were actually repealed under the reign of Catherine the Great, the high tariffs imposed on the city and the ships going into it hampered its ability to thrive as an economic port. In 1780, the region was incorporated as part of the Vologda Governorate, with the Oblast being split up into several counties. By New Year's Eve 1796, the area was incorporated as part of the reborn Arkhangelsk Governorate, with of course the capital being Arkhangelsk again. Towards the end of the 18th century, the economic activity of the region started shifting away from maritime trade and more to logging and sawmilling instead. Throughout the Napoleonic Wars, the Oblast was fairly undisturbed, continuing to trade with Britain in defiance of Napoleon's continental system. It is a little bit ironic then that the British were to actually ravage the area in the Crimean War. This included raiding coastal settlements such as the Solovetsky monastery, as well as trying to bombard Arkhangelsk itself. British troops attempted to land at Arkhangelsk but were stopped by Russian forces. This was a huge moment for the Russian government, and they made a great deal of this to boost morale, which was straggling in the face of losing ground in the Crimea. Towards the end of the 19th century, with a great famine occurring in Russia, it is noted that the Oblast was not spared and food was being sent there by the Tsarist government. However, in 1898 the Oblast was finally connected to the rest of Russia by railway, allowing a greater input of culture and economic activity in the area. During this century, both a museum and a theatre were built, and the area became a great hub of activity for logging and sawmilling. By the start of World War I, Arkhangelsk city alone had over 26 sawmills and 11,000 people employed in that industry directly. The years of the First World War for Arkhangelsk, whilst turbulent, actually offered something of an economic boom. With German submarine warfare in the Baltic, it hampered the ability of the Russians to use St. Petersburg as their main port to get supplies from, and thus they used Arkhangelsk to get supplies from the Entente. When the Bolsheviks came to power in 1917, the region actually declared for them. But the following year, on the 2nd of August, a coup led by Georgy Chaplin seized Arkhangelsk with an Anglo-American force and put it under white control. This northern oblast would last for 2 years. The Anglo-American force that arrived were there for very practical reasons. As before mentioned, Arkhangelsk had been the main port of entry for the Entente powers, offering war supplies to keep Russia in the fight against Germany and the Central Powers. With the Bolsheviks signing themselves out of the war and Germany landing forces in Finland, the Entente powers were worried that all these desperately needed war resources would fall to either the German war machine or to the Bolsheviks. Thus, whilst on paper the Anglo-American forces were there to defend the war materials, in reality they conducted campaigns alongside white forces in the Russian Civil War. Eventually, war weariness, as well as the fact that the war had ended, left to a demand for the troops to be brought back to their home countries, which they promptly did in 1920. This left only a skeleton army of white forces to see off the growing Bolshevik menace. Whilst the Bolsheviks took the area shortly afterwards, it wasn't until 1929 when the area was withdrawn as the Northern Cry. This would last until 1936, when the Oblast was incorporated alongside the Donetsk, Autonomous Okrug and Vologda Oblast into the Northern Oblast. But this would only last for 1 more year, and the Arkhangelsk Oblast was eventually formed. Infamously, throughout the 1920s and 30s, the Oblast was home to many gulags. Most notably, the Yotsevo Gulag in the south, and the Solovetsky Gulag on the grounds of the Solovetsky monastery to the far north. With the start of the Second World War, the city had something of a déjà vu moment. With German domination of the Baltic Sea, Allied convoys were forced to turn again to Arkhangelsk to use as a base of resupply for the Soviet forces. With its precarious position near Leningrad, Allied forces made bi-monthly trips to send supplies desperately needed for the fight there. This in turn, however, attracted the attention of the Luftwaffe, who are estimated to have dropped around 20,000 explosives in the entire oblast. Given the oblast vicinity, both to the Leningrad front as well as to the Finnish forces moving into Karelia, tens of thousands of men signed up for the Red Army to fight this very precarious position in bogging down Axis powers. Hundreds of thousands more were evacuated east, including industries for fear of falling into German hands. It is estimated that Arkhangelsk saw $11 billion worth of military hardware pass through in the defence of the Soviet Union. Once the war ended, the Oblast's sawmilling and logging industries were called upon to help rebuild the rest of Russia. New cities and military installations were installed across the Oblast, and the Oblast was chosen as the perfect place to test the Soviet Union's nuclear capabilities. Due to its remoteness, Novaya Zemlya Island was chosen as the perfect place to experiment with their nuclear capabilities. On the 21st of September 1955, the first nuclear weapon was detonated underwater by the Soviet Union. Novaya Zemlya was also home to the Tsar bomber, the largest nuclear explosion ever detonated in 1961. Compared to the rest of Russia at this time, the Arkhangelsk Oblast had not been in too bad shape compared obviously to much more ravaged regions of Russia, yet still development and growth did occur. An airport was established in 1963 to help connect it better to the rest of Russia. Advances in ice-breaking technology allow the port to be open all year round. This is helping it to retain its trading heritage. With the economic stagnation and turmoil of the 1980s and 1990s, tens of thousands of skilled workers left the region looking for work in other parts of Russia. Today, Arkhangelsk Oblast prospers, and its economic security, which is largely dependent on its natural resources, will be discussed later in this video. Interestingly, up until the 26th of December 2008, the Suchiagin House, possibly the largest wooden building in the world, was available to be seen in Arkhangelsk. Perhaps not surprisingly, the building was torn down for not having planning permission and being an absolute fire hazard. Nevertheless, there are plenty of sites still to be seen in the city of Arkhangelsk, such as the rebuilt Michael the Archangel Cathedral, which was originally destroyed by the Bolsheviks, the leftover British tanks from the Allied intervention, as well as dozens of museums, theatres and monuments, including the Arkhangelsk State Technical University, which opened in 1929. As before stated, the Oblast is one of the most heavily industrialized regions in Russia. The Oblast is home to Severodvinsk, which is the capital of northern shipbuilding and repair, as well as the base of Russian nuclear expeditions. Paper, woodworking and timber remain large industries in the Oblast, with around 55% of all produce in the Oblast being paper-based in 2011. Oil, gas, as well as ores such as bauxite have been discovered in the Oblast, and mining does contribute to the economy. Historically, fishing was a large contributor economically to the area. However, with collectivization, the Soviets were subsidizing collective farming, which, when the Soviet Union fell, was simply not economical to do anymore. Thus, fishing today only contributes very small amounts to the Oblast economy. Furthermore, due to the cold climate, farming is not particularly viable in the area, with it producing around 11% of the economic output of the area. In particular, fur farming is quite popular in the area, being the main export. Fascinatingly, Arkhangelsk is home to the only diamond mine in the whole of Europe, contributing 20% of Russia's diamond reserve from this one mine alone. Lastly, the Oblast is home to the Plesetsk Cosmodrome port, which is based in Mirny, which is used for both defence and for space exploration. Whilst the Oblast does have a slightly higher than average unemployment rate of 6.4%, the development of ice-breaking technology and therefore improved trade, as well as its proximity to NATO countries and the investment of defence which will happen as a result of that, means the future for the Oblast is looking economically quite good, and that figure may well decline in future years. As of the 2010 census, the population stands at over 1.2 million people. This is slightly down from the 2002 census of 1.3. The city of Arkhangelsk itself boasts a population of over 350,000, although this is also down from the 2002 census. Russians make up the majority of the Oblast at over 95%, with Ukrainians being the next largest ethnic group at nearly 1.5%. Small amounts of Nenets, Belarusians, Komi and Tatars are also present in the Oblast, with the remaining 1.3% being an amalgamation of dozens of different ethnic groups. The birth rate in the Oblast stands at 1.68, which is slightly higher than the national average. The majority of the population of the 2012 survey stated they were Christian at over 36%, with the majority being Russian Orthodox, followed by other Christian sects including Old Believers and other Orthodox groups. The next largest group were those who declare themselves to be spiritual but not religious at nearly a third. Atheists come in at over 15%, with an equally large group giving other or no answer at all. Interestingly, the Oblast also has a small section of society who adhere to the old Slavic pagan belief or northerly. Unemployment is estimated to be around 6.4%, which is again slightly higher than the national average. However, drug abuse is below the national average, as is also alcoholism rates in the Oblast. The governor of the Oblast is Igor Orlov, who has been in power since 2012. Not surprisingly, he is a member of the United Russia Party. In the 2018 election, 3/4 of the Oblast voted for Vladimir Putin, with over half the population turning out to put their ballots in. Interestingly, in the Oblast there have been rumours of a Bigfoot-esque creature living in the wilds, due to a few people seeing something that was much akin to the ruins of Bigfoot near the village of Shogorka. The Arkhangelsk Oblast is fortunate to have a dramatic landscape dominated by mighty rivers and ice-capped coasts. Along this wild and dramatic coast, there are many historical sites to see, both in Arkhangelsk and across the Oblast, and today the Oblast is an industrious and prospering part of Russia. Ultimately, life along this cold northern coast has produced always a hardy, resilient people who have managed to turn their home into something very special indeed. Thank you for watching. My name's Andrew, and up next is the Arkhangelsk Oblast. Пока!